I'm going to try and give just a little overview of our program here in Southwest Colorado, and then I'm going to turn it over to Marybeth in Tahoe, and she's going to tell you a little bit about what they've come up with, and then lead this into a discussion this afternoon of fostering neighborhood liaisons, neighborhood leaders for fire-adapted communities through all of our organizations, and kind of ways and best practices maybe for doing that. So Firewise of Southwest Colorado, got our home screen up and our mission there. We began in 2002 after 2002 we had these fire plans written for all of southwestern Colorado. Then in 2003, NFPA held their kind of one of their first backyards and beyondsy things. I don't think it was called that then, but they held a meeting in Durango, which is right in our neck of the woods, and so we had a lot of participation here and quite a few residents who attended. And they stayed engaged as we formed a Firewise Council of Southwest Colorado at that time. And it took a little over a year, and in 2004 we decided that we really needed neighborhood ambassadors because we were doing a lot of just kind of literature outreach, you know, general media kinds of information, but we didn't have that one-on-one connection. And we had a researcher, professor who was involved at Fort Lewis College in the time, who was involved in social science research and said, people listen to their neighbors. So we developed this neighborhood ambassador program and started in 2004 with 11 ambassadors, and now we have over 150 ambassadors in Southwest Colorado, representing about 85 high-risk neighborhoods. So some of them tag team. Some neighborhoods have 3 or 4 ambassadors who work together with different skills. And the idea is that this is a community-based approach to fire-adapted communities. These ambassadors were getting provided with background and orientation, and then they're supposed to take it from there with the different skill sets that they have. And then they get ongoing education and support through a program coordinator. And at the time, beginning in 2004, we just had one person who was just coordinating the ambassador program, very part-time. That's moved up now to where we have 3 almost full-time, well, 3/4 time coordinators in 3 different counties to support those ambassadors with information and whatever else they need. So what are Firewise Neighborhood Ambassadors? They come by many different names, right? In Southwest Colorado, they're Firewise Neighborhood Ambassadors. There are other people like this. Some of you may have spark plugs or just people who do it on their own that you haven't, given a title to. So these are the volunteers that mobilize their neighborhoods related to wildfire safety and preparedness. And they do all kinds of things with regards to that. They outreach to their neighborhoods. They do planning. They work on CWPPs. They turn their properties into an example of wildfire defensible space and a built environment. They create neighborhood contact lists for evacuation preparedness and keeping people up to date when they're burning in the neighborhood. They organize work days. They go after grants. They work with their HOAs if they're working at a homeowners association or some kind of other neighborhood association level. Then they're the key contact with that neighborhood association to try and get the whole association involved in community scale efforts or funding. And they check volunteer hours, and you'll see why that's important in a minute. That's an important component of what they do also. So I just have a few pictures here, some of the things that our Firewise Neighborhood Ambassadors have been able to accomplish, from roadside treatments to landscape scale treatments on neighboring federal lands because of CWPP implementation, to putting in dry hydrants and water sources, to to creating giant piles of chips, finding new ways to deal with slash, developing CWPPs, working with the fire departments and supporting them to come in and do work within the neighborhood. We have one very active fire department in our region, one that's specifically active in fire mitigation that one of our neighborhoods was able to work on. Again, giant slash piles that the fire department can come out and just be on standby for. Other access additions, creating turnarounds, creating emergency egress routes. So there are all kinds of, everything that we can think of in a fire-adapted community is something that we can support a neighborhood leader to get done. And by having these neighborhood leaders, in our case, Firewise neighborhood ambassadors, helping with this work, they're really extending the reach of, you think of one FAC practitioner and what you can do on your own. How many HOAs can you get to encourage them to change address signage or increase access or add another emergency evacuation route compared to having 150 people throughout the counties who are pushing for that in their own neighborhoods. And there's also just the fact that people listen to people that they know. The neighbors listen to neighbors, you listen to friends, you listen to family, and that neighbors listening to neighbors concept is a really important one behind our Firewise Neighborhood Ambassador program. There are also incredible skills that come out of these volunteers. Most of the people, those 150 people we have, are very well educated. Most of them are retired to the area. Many of them are from elsewhere and have retired to here and come with all kinds of different backgrounds and skills that they can tap into and leverage to encourage their neighbors to get involved in wildfire preparedness. And then when it comes to the projects on the ground, they're there to coordinate them so that we as FAC practitioners don't have to. I mentioned in my What an Ambassador Does, the setting and example piece. That's a really important part of having these neighborhood ambassadors for us, is that they do this work on their property, they're ever striving to do it better, and their neighbors see it. And their friends see it, other people see good work that's being done. Many of them also get engaged beyond their neighborhoods and will want to come out when there's a parade or a booth or some other opportunity to talk about what they've done or to encourage others to do it. So there's that opportunity as well to not just operate at the neighborhood scale, but to operate at a larger community scale and expand your overall community FAC outreach through those efforts. The volunteer hours. We've been leveraging $400,000 to $500,000 a year in volunteer hours based on the federal volunteer rate. That's huge when it comes to trying to find grants to support work in neighborhoods. So that's something that we're always pushing with our ambassadors. We've got ways of tracking hours, and then beyond their hours, many of them also collect hours from their neighborhoods. And so that adds to and starts to create a larger picture of what is actually happening on the ground when you can see within a neighborhood this ambassador put in this 100 hours this year, and they also leveraged 600, 1,200, whatever hours of neighborhood volunteer hours through their work days or just through neighbors cutting things on their own property. And Frank's saying that he's seen this as well, that example of the neighbors is great. And I imagine that's working probably with what you would consider spark plugs in your area. And we can function at all of these different scales. So I mentioned our focus is at the neighborhood scale, One of the things that we haven't gotten great at in Southwest Colorado is kind of scaling it down and scaling it up real well. We tend to be hesitant to ask for people to do more than just their neighborhoods because they're already doing so much in their neighborhood already. Well, you have people that are really interested in that, or maybe have a hard time defining their neighborhood because they're not in an HOA, but they would be willing to go out and participate in another community level. Then you have people that just want to learn and know what to do so that they can be better stewards of their own land. And this was really interesting. A couple of, let's see, this was last year sometime, I asked the ambassadors in Montezuma County what they valued about being neighborhood ambassadors. And I really thought that the social aspect was going to jump to the top. They all get along so well and are like, hey, Mr. Ambassador. Every time they see each other, they're very excited. And no one really called out the social aspect or the side of saying it's because I want to protect my home. My neighbors need to do this so that my home can be safer. No, none of them said that out of close to 20 ambassadors that I polled. They wanted to be good stewards of the land. They really valued the connection to information and the ongoing information that they got about fires, about research, about opportunities and grants that were coming up. And they really valued their connections with their neighbors that they were creating, as well as with experts within the field and getting to know their fire chiefs and their BLM, fire prevention and education specialist, and the state foresters. They really valued those connections a whole lot. And then, of course, they enjoy the access to resources to get the work done, whether that's just connections to a list of contractors or it's a connection to a source of grant funding. That's an important piece to keep them going and then accomplishing community scale wildfire risk reduction. So those were some of the things that came out here in Southwest Colorado for what was valuable. And if you have anything else that you feel like is really important, if you have a program where you are that your neighborhood leaders feel like is really valuable about why they're involved, please feel free to put that in the chat box. And I see Pam's commenting about how we do our trainings, and I think we'll dive into that a little bit deeper after Marybeth goes as well and talk about what some of our best practices and ways are of providing training and recruiting neighborhood leaders. I didn't want to do this without hitting on some of the challenges of working with neighborhood leaders or liaisons. You have to remember that if you have a program like this, generally people are learning as they go. Some of them come in with absolutely no fire background. Some of them come in with too much fire background, frankly. There are all kinds of personalities. Some of them make better neighborhood leaders than others in terms of their neighbors wanting to really listen to them. You have to be able to support the volunteers that you have. You have to be able to communicate them and have somebody who's constantly communicating with them. Not constantly like every day, but having that touch every 2 to 4 weeks to make sure that they're seeing something, hearing something, and being reminded that this is an issue that they should stay engaged on. And that's probably a huge challenge with any volunteer program. Most of who we have ended up having of those 150 volunteers, probably 140 of them are retired. So that means they want to go on vacations, they want to go see grandchildren, maybe they're seasonal and they're gone for 4 to 6 months out of the year. So that's okay, you can still work with that, but that's just something you should know going and working with these groups. Burnout. It can also be exhausting if you do it year after year after year and you don't feel like neighbors are accomplishing anything, or you've just worked so hard with back outreach. We have had some folks run into this. we have the other side of that too, where sometimes they just want everybody out there tomorrow, and you can't hardly keep up with them and get the experts in that they need in their neighborhood. And then finally, this kind of shit happens thing. We just had our first neighborhood ambassador that passed away this about 2 weeks ago, and we knew we had all these retirees. We have an aging population, and it was going to happen eventually. He was on our steering committee for several years. He was one of the very first 11 ambassadors who was in our program, and he recruited other people in his neighborhood before he passed away. I don't think he was planning on that, but it's just the reality of the group, the age group that we've been working with for volunteers. And other things come up as well. People change, people move, people get divorced and moved out of the neighborhood. There's all kinds of interesting people issues that come up. So this is one of my favorite quotes from one of our ambassadors, who was also a very early ambassador, who after they had a fire in their neighborhood, so don't ask yourself whether you've done enough mitigation, always be asking yourself what more you can do. And so my response to that is kind of what more can we do for them, and you know, how can we create a better environment and more support for our neighborhood leaders to be able to do their work within their neighborhoods better. So within this context, this ambassador program and the volunteer program has been something that's really strong to Firewise of Southwest Colorado. So we've gotten many inquiries over the years. I know one of those, and a really cool programs that are developing, are with Lake Tahoe, and they're doing some really interesting things that I think are different than what we've been able to do in terms of kind of the tiered approach to neighborhood leaders. And so I want to turn it to Marybeth to talk a little bit about how they're designing their program.
Thank you so much, Becca. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you, Marybeth. You're sounding good.
Okay, great. Let me just pull up the PowerPoint, and I can begin. So that's a beautiful Lake Tahoe. For those of you who will be coming in April, that's just a glimpse of what you might be seeing. And so I talked to Becca and wanted to know more about her Firewise community and the approach that she did, and how did she get 150 ambassadors? Because to me, just starting this out, or restarting it, I guess, I'm picking up the pieces from the old Nevada Fire Safe Council, and just wanted to figure out, where do you start? What does that look like? And so one of the things that, working with Professor Elwood Miller, he's always kind of expressed this need from the Nevada Fire Safe Council, is that people want to belong to something. They want to be praised for the efforts that they're doing, and they want to be committed. We all want to do something that, you know, leaves a legacy of our own personal story. And that kind of goes into the engagement of meeting with people. I've gone to a lot of outreach events this summer, just meeting people where they're at. So going to probably like non-traditional things to recruit people to be leaders. So going to like live free music concerts, and even though that's a lot of fun, I'm able to talk to people and see what are the things they're interested in, and what is their desire with the fire adapted community. So fire adapted community is a pretty new term in Tahoe, at least, and we've kind of defined our fire adapted community as the fire protection district and the department itself. So in this picture, you can see that a fire adapted community is the fire district, and they have targeted areas where we have a really high threat, and they go there each year and target those areas based on a revolving schedule. And so we wanted to have more connection with the people living in the private sector and not having to use enforcement as much and have more of a positive feedback for them. And so we kind of took on this idea of creating the neighborhood leaders, which is what Becca is calling a neighborhood ambassador. And so we have two different types of leaders in Tahoe. We have one leader that is geographically based, so they're within their neighborhood, and they are going to do mitigation efforts, get things actually rolling, hand out information and educational materials, maybe host a block party where the fire district comes and people get to learn what are the hazards in their neighborhood and what they can do to reduce those hazards. And then we have a second type of leader, which is a social leader. And that is somebody who maybe they don't really know all of their neighbors, because we do have a huge second homeowner population here in Tahoe, and we have a lot of vacant homes as well. So they come out for like a week, and I don't really consider those a second home. I mean, I guess they're probably like their third home or something. So people come up, and so these are the people that live in those areas as a full-time local, and they're part of all these other groups. So it might be a Rotary Club or a Master Gardeners Club or maybe even a running club. And so we connect them to the fire district and what the fire district services are, and kind of create a plan together on what it looks like to be a part of the fire adapted community, which is identified as a district. And then from there, we've created this network. So it's the Tahoe Network of Fire Adapted Communities. We have 5 fire districts within the basin, and so we're not just in North Lake Tahoe, it's in Nevada and California. So we have different restrictions within the fire districts, and each fire district is very different on what capacity that they have to support. And that's kind of how the Tahoe RCD got involved, is we came on, and I was hired back in December to be support to the fire districts to really promote fire adapted communities. And so the leaders get to be involved in the network, and there's many benefits that are similar to what Becca's were. But, you know, the main aspect of the Tahoe RCD is providing outreach for people to come to. So we also, not only do we attend things that are existing, but we create things. So recently we created an interactive field tour where people came out and got to learn about community protection side of fire adapted communities, and measuring DBH of a forest stand that had been cleared and one that had not been managed at all, and just talk about forest health. We use the Living with Fire educational materials here in Tahoe, and so we don't use the Firewise materials because there's really specific things in Tahoe, and we want to have this consistent message. And then we use the fire district services, so chipping programs are in place, free defensible space evaluations are in place as well. And then through these activities, we create partnership with the communities, the fire districts, and the agencies. We have in Tahoe the Tahoe Fire and Fuels team and the public information team, and we get together every month and have discussions on what are the messages that we're trying to get to the public. And one of the really unique things is part of our tier membership for the Tahoe Network of Fire Adapted Communities. So based on my outreach, I noticed that a lot of people weren't really interested in being a leader. Hearing that word was kind of intimidating to them. You know, what does that entail? And I don't have the time to do that. Most people who do live here in Tahoe want to recreate, and they want to be outside. They don't really necessarily want to be working on their home. So we created this tiered membership for those who do want to stay up to date on information. So we created an individual level, which is somebody who's interested in finding the information, maybe coming out to volunteer for something, or maybe interested in going to some of those non-traditional educational opportunities like a field tour or a trivia night that we're hosting. And so that's just for everybody that signs up, and you just have to sign up for a newsletter. So it's really easy to be an individual person within the Tahoe Network of Fire Adapted Communities. And then we have those leaders, like I explained, we have the social and the geographic leader, and they're supported through the RCD and through the fire district. We meet with them, and since we have 11 leaders right now, we have 11 leaders in 11 neighborhoods starting out, so it's interesting to see that that's what Southwest Colorado started out with as well. But these are people who, we have somebody who hosted a block party, and the fire district came out, and so did the county roads, and we just talked about what it is to be a fire-adapted community, and we let these leaders know that there's rebates available, and we're creating a rebate program right now to help offset some of the costs for people to do mitigation. And in order for you to receive the rebate, you have to have a leader and a neighborhood that has been delineated by the leader. So kind of going back to this screen, there can be multiple leaders within an area because the leader is able to define what their neighborhood is, and pretty much that's the outreach for them. So how many houses do they want to work with? Some of them are, you know, small little circles, and there's 13 homes, and some of them are 400 homes, and they work with an HOA, and they distribute information through their newsletter. And so the leaders are pretty active, and we work the RCD, the FAC coordinator, which is me, and then a member of the fire district meets with the leader, and we host an orientation and explain to them, you know, what are the steps that you want to commit to within the next 90 days, and then what is your 6-month plan for the neighborhood. And so it's kind of like creating a prescription for the neighborhood, and then what are the actions that the leader can take. And then from there, we have an ambassador. So we used to have a Nevada Fire Safe Council, and that went away back in 2011. And so coming in, we've had some of these old chapter leaders who are still interested in the fire adapted communities effort and reducing the wildfire risk, but they their neighborhoods are pretty much 80% in compliance. So they want to be a part of this, so we allow them to come in and sit with our the Tahoe Fire and Fuels team meetings, the Fire Adapted Communities Development Group meetings, and they get to really put their input based on their experience of what it's like really working in the community and being a leader within the community. So those are the unique things that are, and you know, we're up and growing, but that's what we're doing here in Tahoe, and kind of basing it off of what I saw with Southwest Colorado. So far it's been pretty successful. We have 251 individuals signed up that are receiving the newsletter, the 11 leaders, and we have 3 ambassadors. And so this kind of is something that Becca and I were talking about is, you know, what would some resources be for this COP? What is useful, and is there some types of products that we could create out of this? And so I'm going to let Becca take over from here and kind of walk us through the conversation and see what kind of questions you guys have from there.
Okay. Thanks, Marybeth. That was awesome. So I'm probably one of the few people on this call that hasn't gotten to be part of the landowner-homeowner group to date, and it seems like you guys have been doing some great webinars and keeping that going. But with Marybeth asking about our programs and then getting connected with the new folks in Utah who are trying to create a neighborhood leader program, and then hearing the interest from Porth and Mark, who came out for a learning exchange here in Southwest Colorado. Well, I think it might have been just last month. It really dawned on me that it seems like there are a lot of folks out there who want to have these leaders and maybe need some guidance in how do we create this program that's going to work for us in our community. And many are already starting with an existing program. Many may already have spark plugs within their neighborhoods, or neighborhood spark plugs who are doing the Firewise Communities USA thing. So what I would like to do is just kind of walk us through some practices, and I'm not going to read what's on every screen. They're just some backdrop pieces, and then ask you to chime in either in chat or unmute yourself and chime in with ideas of additional things that are working for you with regards to recruitment, training, ongoing education, communication with leaders, building a network with the leaders and professionals, creating relevant materials, incentive programs, and celebrating successes and recognizing your volunteers. So I've got these broken out into different slides, so let's not try to get ahead of ourselves. We'll spend just a couple of minutes on each slide and run through these real quick, and I'm going to let Marybeth, I think, is steering if you want to jump to the first one on recruitment strategies. Here's some ideas of things that we have that are working. I saw some discussion in the chat box about the whole succession idea and asking people to find somebody else that they're leaving. Also, Marybeth's piece in the tiered participation levels and having individuals who then may eventually decide that they can define their own neighborhood and move to a larger scale is another approach and way to recruit. I would open it up and see if anybody else has other ways that you are currently bringing people in as neighborhood leaders. Or spark plugs, or whatever you may call them where you are, if you already have something like this. And I think, Marybeth, are you on a screen that you can add on to, or take it out of slideshow or something so you can add if people have things to add?
I can add one, yeah.
Okay. Wendy just asked how much of our time in Southwest Colorado do we spend cultivating our ambassadors. We are up to 5 part-time staff, and 3 of those are pretty much entirely dedicated to the part-time, to supporting our neighborhood ambassadors at 80 to 100 hours a month. So 80 to 100 hours a month in the counties. I think we started at about 35 hours a month in a county as far as how much time we put into supporting our ambassadors.
So, Rebecca, it looks like everybody's on mute. I don't know if that has to be, if there's a way to unmute it from Marybeth then, yeah, or if the individual has to click on the little mute thingy on the sides of their
I think if I unmute everyone, it's going to get pretty loud. So it's best for individuals to unmute themselves. Please feel free to, though.
Okay, and it's just that little mic icon to the right of your name on the participant list. So Bree is asking how your organization is funded.
We've actually started with Secure Rural Schools Act Title III funds, which are for Firewise Communities and CWPP work. And that's kind of how we got started with the coordinator positions. So our counties were opting in for that funding and getting that funding. That's how we got started. We get it from all kinds of other, from federal and state and county sources now, but that's how we started. So here's some ideas. Hopefully this gives you some good ideas on recruitment strategies that we can come back to, but we should probably move on to, so here Marybeth has up the training strategies, or almost had. So it's probably good to jump to that. If you have something you want to add to recruitment, just pop it in the chat box or let us know. So Marybeth said a little bit about how they are training. They're providing an orientation, and I saw some chat about that as well. We started with a kind of 1 3 or 4 hour long meeting for our ambassadors, and we've moved on to breaking that into 2 separate meetings. One kind of focused on what our programs are and resources for ambassadors, and another one more with our partners, focusing on forest health and fire ecology and introducing some partners. We have resource notebooks that we share, which have probably a dozen resources in them just on defensible space. And it's the idea to kind of give a really good introduction and full notebook of materials to these new volunteers that they can study and pick out what they like and what catches their eye to share. I know maybe Allison will have something to chime in here on kind of trying to do that master's program approach where people learn a piece of FAC over months. Yeah, Citizen Fire Academy, thanks. That's kind of what I was thinking of, modeled after Master Gardener. Thank you, Allison. So that's another approach that we have an example of within our network as far as orientation. And then there's also just the one-on-one piece. If you don't have a whole lot of people to orient at a time and you're getting 2 or 3 leaders here and there, that's that one-on-one, what do you need to know? And here is the information I can provide you can also be really helpful. Allison has curriculum for the Citizen Fire Academy. So maybe we should change that on the slide from Master's Program to Citizen Fire Academy as a training strategy. Are there any other training ways that people are bringing volunteers up to speed? Is there anything introductory from like Firewise Communities USA standpoint?
Becca, why don't you talk about a couple of the workshops that we've done, the HID and the Mitigation 101.
I have that in the next slide of ongoing education.
Okay.
Because I feel like this is just kind of thinking about upfront. There are ways to try and get people kind of a base amount of information that they can get started with. And then I guess we can go on and jump ahead to the next piece. You've got to get them started, but then how do you keep them educated and engaged with interesting things from there? So some things that we have done. Go ahead.
Really quick, one quick question. This is Michelle. On the sort of onboarding piece, have you guys found that having like written expectations for your ambassadors or for Marybeth for those 3 different tiers, that has been an important part of your program to help people understand exactly what they need to be doing? And is that something you guys incorporate?
Yes.
I feel like it's been a really good, useful tool because we're able to I do an e-newsletter so they know about these trainings that are coming up, and it keeps people informed about what's happening. And we have a pretty high success of open rate and click-through rate, and we're always having experts, write in something and add it to the newsletter. So I feel like that is a really important aspect of it, having people just that constant drumbeat of information to keep, wildfire on the agenda, especially over here in Tahoe when most of the time you're hiking or water skiing or snow skiing. People aren't really you're not really seeing those signs everywhere. So I think it's a good way to have that communication on a continual basis.
Yeah, and I think in addition to the ongoing communication, something that I believe you're doing, Marybeth, and that we do here in Southwest Colorado is having a volunteer commitment form, which I think is a little more maybe what you were asking about in addition to the ongoing communications. That yes, we set expectations. We say kind of these are all the checklist of things you might do. Check off the things that you think that you're going to do, and give us a list of goals for the short term that you're going to start on right away, and liability waiver, that kind of stuff that we get right up front. So yeah, that's a piece of our onboarding as well.
Nice, thanks.
Yeah, actually to piggyback off that, I'm sorry that I misunderstood your question, but that's one of the things that we brought on after I had spoke to Becca, because we did not have a commitment form, and I noticed that people who had said that they would be a leader weren't really doing what they said they were doing. However, those who have signed their commitment forms and like actually had a little plan for themselves, those ones are being really active and they are following through. So that piece of paper means a lot, and we have the leader's signature, the fire district member's signature, and then my personal signature as well, just to hold everybody accountable so that they know that the support is there for them. So.
Yeah, and having that write-in space for what are your short-term goals, I would say, is kind of one of the best practices that I sounded like you guys picked up on, that we adopted. Wasn't in the original stuff, but that's been there for a few years with us. And I don't know how great we are at using it, but when you have somebody set their own goals, it gives them a place to go. It gives you a place to go back to as the coordinator and check in on, oh, okay, these people are going to work on this planning aspect or this access aspect to support them. So a lot of different, long-term, there are lots of things that we do, education. We have bi-monthly meetings that are really just for these neighborhood leaders with an in-service training related to fire-adapted communities, and then we'll have more specialized in-depth workshops for a variety of things. All of this article sharing in the newsletters is huge ongoing information, and I saw Wendy ask, I hope you're sharing the FAC blog. We definitely share pieces of that and encourage them to subscribe. I'm not sure that we're at 100% on our ambassadors subscribing to that, but we will get there. And then this is kind of a huge thing, is you're constantly bringing new people on and you have these regular meetings, is trying to think about that and how you structure your meetings. Because every time you've got somebody new show up, they bring up the insurance issue and you're like, oh, okay, we had a new person, I should have known this was going to happen. So that's a really key piece, is to try to think about kind of having something for the newer folks as well as building upon past knowledge for people who have been engaged for a long time. And then inviting them along to participate with experts when things are happening, whether it's a tour in their neighborhood or they're fairly new and they want to have a better understanding of the built environment, and you take them along to do some site assessments or that kind of thing. Let's jump ahead so we don't completely run out of time. I think communications might be the next piece that we have, and ways of keeping in touch. This one, you guys probably all have lots of different things to add, ways to communicate. You said one a few minutes ago, Marybeth, when you were giving your talk about some fun way that you engage. It was a tour you had coming up, or?
Yeah, so we are trying to engage with people that we know are a little bit younger, and because we have that same, they're mostly retired individuals. So we want to make this education outreach to all ages and not have to be just if you're retired and you have the time. So we've been hosting, we call it an interactive field tour, where we connected people to forest health. In Tahoe, we have very, very dense forests, and people have grown up thinking that this is what a healthy forest looks like. So by connecting people to what fuel reduction projects look like and health of the ecosystem, we're educating people about what that looks like, and then, you know, why it's important for them to do pile burning, or why it's important for them to create their own defensible space. So that's one of the unique things. We just had a fire here, the Emerald Fire, and there is a huge significance in the environmental impact on the treated land versus the untreated land. And we're going to be hosting another field tour in the spring with leaders and network members, showing them, giving them this educational aspect. But, you know, it's fun because they get to go on a hike as well. So they are having a good time outside, but also getting this educational component. We also are working with doing like trivia nights and making them about fire and forest, all the questions. And so, you know, kind of picking people's brain and getting them to think about it in a way that is a little bit more social. because I know you do like your coffee talks and things, and so trying to come up with ideas to really get those second homeowners or just really get FAC on the agenda and get people hearing that term and learning about that. So that's one of those are a couple of the new things that we have going on here in Tahoe.
That's great. The trivia piece, I definitely add that as we're moving. That's what caught my attention when you were first talking. And the tours are more, there's some communications, but that's kind of an ongoing outreach education strategy as well, not just communications, because you have to get them there in the first place. But I'm also seeing some really good ideas and thoughts in the chat, and I'm hoping we'll kind of maybe trend that direction in a little bit. Allison with Project Wildfire is saying how you're networking your spark plugs together, probably in a very similar way to the way we do our regular meetings here, and that's a really valuable and paramount piece of the program. Let's go ahead to our next slide, which I think is networking and creating a valuable network. So beyond just the communications, it's not just getting people, how do you get people information, but there's also the aspect of how do you get them to connect with each other or connect to the right experts to get something done or to get information. So here's a few ways that we're doing that, and I feel like we're kind of a hub-and-spoke network here in Southwest Colorado, more or less, with some ambassadors connecting outside of meetings, but most of those connections happening within our bi-monthly meetings. But we introduce some of our key partners in our upfront trainings. One of the things that we've done that we haven't really figured out how to put out there yet, but we think is a great idea, is creating a best practices directory where we can see of our 85 neighborhoods, here's what kind of neighborhood it is, what kind of vegetation it has, and all of the FAC practices that they've implemented, so that somebody could look, another neighborhood ambassador could look and say, hey, they're similar, or they've done this already. I can connect with them about that. And another way that we do that is having them present at meetings and bringing your leaders in. Don't just always have an expert presenting at a meeting, but allow your leaders to share what they're accomplishing and share their lessons learned and their successes from neighborhood scale projects. So building that network we found to be a pretty important part of our programs here in Southwest Colorado. Let's jump ahead so we don't run out of time, and then we can get more input on what to do with all this when we get to the end. I didn't have a whole lot of examples from Southwest Colorado here as far as the relevant materials, because I feel like we borrow all kinds of great materials from everywhere else because there's so much great stuff out there. But then I see things that come up over time, and there have been a lot of the great Spanish language resources. I've seen some of the needs that we've had come up in Southwest Colorado are dealing with the language, dealing with trailer park, and that's a whole different setting as far as it comes to the fire hazards. We've dealt with communities that are interested in the planning aspect, but they're really just too small to do a full-blown community wildfire protection plan. And so we've kind of developed a more straightforward community assessment that maybe tiers a little bit more closely with what an assessment and plan might look like for Firewise Communities USA. So we have kind of our own version of that we work on. But it's a very important aspect of having volunteers, is making sure that the materials that we're providing them are relevant to the areas that they are working within. Let's go ahead. Providing incentives to your volunteers. This is huge. This is a huge benefit. There's a reason that some people will get involved, even if they don't say it when you ask them, because they see an opportunity to get money or get help figuring out what needs to happen in a neighborhood scale. And so we've done grant writing workshops and make sure to share that information, but also created our own incentive programs based on what the needs are in your community. If you've already got a great outreach program that chips people slash for free on the curbs, then you probably don't need another chipper program. In Southwest Colorado, we created a chipper rebate program because we didn't have anything like that. And we saw all these slash piles and people needed help getting support to get them dealt with. So, you know, these incentive programs should really need to be tiered to what your needs are within your community. And then just incentives for being involved. You know, what are they in it for? For instance, often when we have workshops, it doesn't cost anything or it costs less if you're a neighborhood ambassador versus if you aren't. So that's like something, Marybeth, maybe to think about, that, you know, maybe your leaders can participate in all these things for free, but if you want to participate as an individual, it's $10 or whatever. You know, you give that little incentive for recognizing them for doing everything that they do. Let's bump ahead. I think we have one more. And there's some great conversation happening in our chat box. Don't forget to thank your people. Don't forget to thank your volunteers and recognize your volunteers. There are lots of ways to do this, from thank you letters to putting them in your newsletters and any of your local or regional communications that you have, recognizing them at meetings. This picture is Smoky Bear Hugs and Flowers for one of our new Firewise Communities USA recognition ceremonies. And I have been really impressed. Pam can tell us how many Firewise Communities USA we're up to in Southwest Colorado now. I think it's probably 13 or 14 or 15, somewhere in there. But
exactly,
it's amazing how much they appreciate that, and just having that sign, really having that sign and that letter from the national program, it gives so much more clout, and the leaders just feel so excited about that, even though, you know, to me, I feel like it's just a sign. You know, you've probably been meeting all the expectations for half a dozen years anyhow before we really push you to go into this, but that's a great way to recognize. And then now, if you have somebody that's really outstanding, we also have those National Wildfire Mitigation Awards, which we've had several folks here in Southwest